Hello there, and welcome. Tonight, we drift into a question that echoes through the stars. If the universe is so vast, so ancient, and so full of possibilities, why haven't we heard from anyone? Every grain of sand on Earth could represent a star, and most of those stars host planets. Some may be billions of years older than our sun. So, where is everybody? Maybe we're early. Maybe we're alone. Or maybe we're surrounded and simply haven't noticed. Tonight, we'll explore 100 strange, mind-stretching theories from the scientific to the surreal, all trying to answer the most cosmic of mysteries, the Fermi Paradox. And while you're settling in, before your eyes grow too heavy, I'd love it if you gently tapped subscribe or pressed the little hype button YouTube recently added. It's a small click, but it helps keep these experiments and explorations orbiting out into the algorithm. You can also leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the night. It's oddly fascinating to see where people are drifting off with us, scattered across the world like stars across the galaxy. Now take a deep breath, let your day drift away, and let's travel together into the quiet corners of the universe. In 1961, an astronomer named Frank Drake scribbled an equation onto a chalkboard not to solve a math problem, but to shape a question. That equation has echoed ever since, quietly stretching our imaginations with each variable. The Drake equation wasn't meant to provide an exact number. It was a framework, a kind of cosmic Mad Libs for estimating how many intelligent, communicative civilizations might exist in our galaxy right now. It factors in things like the rate of star formation, the number of planets per star, how many of those might support life, how many might evolve intelligence, and how many of those might try to communicate across the stars. And when you start to plug in even conservative estimates, the results are unsettling. The Milky Way is home to roughly 100 to 400 billion stars. Many of them are older than our sun. Most, we now know, have planets. Current data from the Kepler Space Telescope and others suggest that about 1 in 5 sun-like stars hosts an Earth-sized planet in the habitable zone, the not too hot, not too cold region, where liquid water could exist. That gives us tens of billions of potentially Earth-like planets in our galaxy alone. Pause and let that settle. Not galaxies, not the universe, just one galaxy, ours. And Earth is only about 4.5 billion years old. The galaxy itself is more than 3 times that age. If even a tiny fraction of those planets developed life, and a smaller fraction developed intelligence, and an even smaller one created technology capable of sending or receiving signals, there should still be thousands, maybe millions, not just intelligent civilizations out there, but ones that are older, wiser, and far more advanced than us. Yet when we listen, the silence stretches on. This is the heart of the Fermi Paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, who, during a casual lunch conversation in the 1,950 seconds, asked a simple question: where is everybody? If life is common, if intelligence is probable, if technology spreads, why haven't we heard from anyone? Why don't we see signs of their machines, their beacons, their megastructures circling stars like shining halos? Some believe we may be missing the forest for the trees, that we have vastly underestimated the distances or overestimated the odds, that perhaps life is incredibly rare, or intelligence even more so. But others point back to the numbers, to the staggering math, to the idea that if Earth is not special, not the only place where life emerged, then the silence isn't just puzzling. It's deeply, cosmically strange. The mediocrity principle is the anyway, quiet assumption hiding beneath much of modern science that Earth, and by extension humanity, is not special. That we are one sample from a large pool and not a miraculous exception. It suggests that what happened here, the emergence of life, intelligence, technology, should happen elsewhere too, given enough time and similar conditions. It's not a belief, it's a guiding principle, grounded in humility. And if that's true, if we are not special, then others should exist. Maybe many others, and yet, silence. Even factoring in the vastness of space and the limitations of our instruments, the lack of any confirmed signal, any undeniable evidence, feels like a glaring contradiction. If advanced civilizations are out there, and even a few are trying to communicate or expand, the signals should have reached us by now. Some scientists argue that in just a few million years, a blink on cosmic timescales, a single, ambitious species could spread across an entire galaxy. If even one had done so, long before we emerged, we might see evidence of their passing, and yet the skies remain stubbornly still. It's like walking into a city expected to be bustling with lights, traffic, and voices, only to find it cold and empty. The buildings intact, the roads pristine, but no one home. It raises uncomfortable questions. Were they never there to begin with? Did they come and go? Are they hiding? Or are we simply too new, too young, to see the patterns others left behind? The paradox doesn't lie in wishful thinking. It lies in probability. The odds say we are likely not the first, not the only. The math doesn't promise aliens, but it leans heavily against isolation. And that's what makes the silence so unnerving. If the numbers suggest abundance and reality shows absence, then somewhere, something isn't adding up. Maybe one of the variables in Drake's equation is far smaller than we imagined. Perhaps life is harder to start than we think, or intelligence is rare, or civilizations don't last long enough to send messages. Maybe we've overestimated the chance of survival, or vastly underestimated the danger of discovery. But the more we learn, the more the numbers seem to support company, not solitude. Planet after planet is discovered, some with thick atmospheres, some with potential oceans. The raw ingredients for life, carbon, water, energy, are scattered all across the galaxy. Life, it seems, may not require miracles. It may only require time, and we've had plenty of that. So the question lingers, heavier each year. If it's so likely, where are they? Drake's equation didn't answer that question. It didn't claim to, but it did something more haunting. It framed the silence. It showed how loud the galaxy should be, and by contrast, how loud the silence truly is. The longer we listen, the more chilling that silence becomes. Not just because it's empty, but because it might be hiding something, or warning of something, or reflecting something about us that we haven't yet understood. We expect the universe to teem with life because everything we've learned about stars and planets and chemistry tells us it should. The numbers don't lie. Or do they? Imagine walking into a vast, empty room filled with 1,000 doors. You know that behind at least some of those doors, others have passed through. Maybe they still walk in other halls, far away. Maybe they vanished. But no matter how many you open, no one answers, no echoes, just silence. This is the Fermi Paradox made personal, and one of the most haunting explanations for it is something called the Great Filter. The Great Filter is not a wall. It's not a being, or a decision, or even a moment. It's a test. A stage in the unfolding of intelligent life that is nearly impossible to pass. A point where most civilizations, if they ever arise at all, simply don't make it through. The filter could be behind us, long past in the primordial mists of our past. Or it could be ahead, waiting in a future we haven't reached yet, quiet and immovable, like a cliff in the dark. If the filter is behind us, that might mean life is rare, stunningly rare. Perhaps the origin of life itself is so improbable that Earth is one of the only places it's ever happened. The leap from non-living chemicals to something that can copy itself, change, and grow might be vanishingly small. Maybe planets with water and sunlight and time still never cross that threshold. Maybe the very first single cell on Earth was not just rare, but miraculous. Or perhaps the filter came slightly later, when simple cells evolved into complex ones, When cooperation replaced isolation, when cells began building larger structures, sharing energy, dividing tasks, forming the first steps toward multicellular life, that too could have been a bottleneck. One Earth just barely passed through. It's tempting to believe that's the case, that we already slipped through the narrow gate, that the reason the galaxy is silent is because few, if any, ever made it this far, that our presence here, thinking, speaking, wondering, is already an almost impossible victory. If true, it would mean we are rare, but it would also mean we are safe. The hardest part is behind us. But there's another possibility. What if the great filter is ahead? What if life, even intelligent life, is common but something else happens next? Something most never survive. The moment a civilization gains the ability to destroy itself, the countdown begins. Nuclear weapons, engineered pandemics, climate systems unraveling, artificial intelligence evolving too quickly, technologies that arrive before the wisdom to wield them. A species becomes capable of reshaping its world, and in doing so, lights a fire it cannot contain. From this view, intelligence is not the final step. It's the trigger. The moment the clock starts ticking, that would mean the silence isn't ancient. It's recent. The galaxy is full of bright sparks that blink out as quickly as they arrive, consumed by their own flame. Civilizations rise, stretch outward, and then collapse. Some through war, others through slow decay. Some, perhaps, simply choose to vanish, retreating into simulations or leaving behind no trace. If the great filter is still ahead, then the quiet sky is not a sign of safety. It is a warning. There is a third idea, more unsettling still, that we are the filter, not because we passed it or because we haven't reached it yet, but because we may become it, a force that spreads through the galaxy and prevents others from rising, not out of malice, but inevitability. If expansion is faster than emergence, even one civilization might suppress the rest without trying. If we are the first, we may someday become the reason others don't get a chance. Our technology, our presence, our very noise in the cosmic sea drowning out whispers before they ever become voices. It's a strange idea to hold, that by being here, we may shape what isn't. But the great filter isn't just about aliens. It's about us. It's about what kind of future is possible, and which futures quietly erase themselves. If we knew the filter was behind us, we might feel hope. If we believed it was ahead, we might feel fear. But in both cases, the implications are profound. Because if most civilizations don't make it, why should we? It's a question that brushes against everything we build, every choice we make, every new discovery we rush toward. Are we designing tools for survival, or are we walking, blind and bold, toward the same wall others hit before? If intelligence tends to burn itself out, then our challenge isn't just to survive, but to break a pattern we've never even seen, to live past the filter, to choose sustainability over conquest, to choose curiosity over control, to make the leap from the civilization to something greater, something lasting, something worthy of passing through the filter. It's easy to imagine that the galaxy's silence means no one is there, but it could mean that everyone tried, and no one made it. That civilizations are born with the seeds of their own undoing already inside them, and that the test is not just about being smart enough to invent, but wise enough not to destroy. And if we are alone, not by chance, but by default, then we may be the answer to the paradox, not the exception. The great filter may be a riddle we don't get to solve until it's too late. It may be gentle and slow, or sudden and final. It may not announce itself. It may just arrive, as so many things do, in hindsight. But tonight, as you lie still beneath the quiet stars, consider this. You are living in a moment that may be unique, not just on Earth, but in the galaxy. A window where life, intelligence, and choice all exist at once. The silence above us Maybe the story of those who never got this far, or of those who did, but couldn't hold on. What we do next matters more than we know. There's a strange kind of comfort in believing we're being watched, not in the paranoid, shadowed sense of surveillance, but in the ancient way that sailors once looked up at stars and imagined they were being guided. That someone, somewhere, sees us, cares even. In the deep silence of the galaxy, the zoo hypothesis is one of the few ideas that doesn't hinge on absence, but presence, unseen, distant, deliberate presence. It suggests that we are not alone, and never have been. That intelligent life does exist elsewhere, maybe in vast numbers, and that they already know about us. They're just choosing not to say hello. Not yet. In this scenario, Earth becomes a kind of cosmic nature, preserve an untouched island in a galactic ocean, a place left wild so it can grow undisturbed. We are the animals behind the one-way glass, free to act, to rise and fall, to dream and destroy, but always under watchful eyes, invisible but near. The idea isn't new. It echoes in our oldest myths, sky gods, watchers, messengers who descend in beams of light. Stories passed from one civilization to another long before satellites and telescopes. Ancient people looked to the heavens and didn't just see stars, they felt presence, as if something looked back. It's easy to dismiss now, to categorize under legend and imagination. But perhaps these stories were distortions of a truth we still haven't caught up with. If advanced civilizations are out there, and they've been around for millions of years, it's not hard to imagine they've had time to find us. Our radio waves have only been leaking into space for about a century. But Earth has been displaying signs of life, atmospheric oxygen, seasonal shifts, light and heat signatures for much longer. If someone had a reason to look, they would have seen us coming, and they might have decided to wait. Non-interference is a principle we already understand. On our own planet, researchers studying isolated tribes have debated whether to make contact or observe from a distance. In many cases, the decision is to stay back, to let cultures develop naturally without disruption, to avoid rewriting a story mid-sentence. The argument is that contact would change everything. It might damage the fabric of belief, alter behaviors, or even cause harm. Not out of malice, but from overwhelming influence. Now imagine the same principle applied at a cosmic scale. To us, their technology would look like magic. Their presence, divine. A single interaction could dismantle centuries of philosophy, religion, and identity. If they value our growth, they may think it kinder, wiser to remain silent. In that version of reality, we are under cultural quarantine, not because we're dangerous, but because we're unfinished. There may be protocols, rules, observers assigned to watch and record, but never interfere. Perhaps signals from Earth are collected and studied, like episodes of a long-running series. Maybe our wars and music and breakthroughs are archived in a vault of civilizations. There could be guidelines against revealing themselves too early. Maybe they're waiting for a signal not from our transmitters, but from our behavior, a sign that we're ready. But readiness is a vague word. Ready for what? For contact? For truth? For responsibility? If the zoo hypothesis is true, then we are like children growing up in a house full of mirrors, never knowing the windows have been blacked out from the other side. And yet, from time to time, the curtains seem to flutter. There have been moments, strange sightings, signals that never repeated, encounters that defy simple explanations. We call them anomalies. We catalog them under UFOs, UAPs, odd blips on radar screens, or impossible maneuvers caught on grainy video. Most are noise, some are weather, a few we don't know. That doesn't mean they're proof, but it does mean the story isn't closed. People throughout history have claimed to see things, lights in the sky, beings not of this world, messages in dreams, often dismissed as fantasy or deception. But what if some were glimpses not of the watchers themselves, but of the observation process slipping at the edges, a scout misstepping, a lens catching the light, a shadow moving where no shadow should be? If we are in a preserve, then even brief contact might be forbidden. But mistakes happen, curiosity flickers, and maybe not all civilizations agree on the rules. Perhaps some are more lenient, or rogue, or compassionate in their own strange way. The idea of being watched brings both fear and comfort. It implies that we are not adrift, that someone knows we're here. But it also suggests boundaries, that our sky has edges, that we are inside something, and that someone else holds the key. And maybe that's why it feels so quiet. Not because nothing is out there, but because everything is. Listening, watching, waiting. The zoo hypothesis doesn't require gods or monsters. It only requires patience, the kind that spans millennia, the kind that sees Earth not as a threat or a prize, but as a story unfolding slowly, one that must be read all the way through, not skipped ahead. If they are out there, and they are watching, then every moment matters, every conflict, every act of kindness, every signal we send, and every silence we keep. We may not know the rules, but we are already playing the game. And perhaps one day, when the story reaches the right chapter, the glass will turn transparent, and we will see who's been standing on the other side, all along. In the deep woods, there's a kind of silence that doesn't soothe. It wraps around the trees like a warning. It isn't peace, it's tension. Something watching, something waiting. No bird song, no rustle. Just a stillness that suggests the animals are holding their breath. You're not alone in the forest, but you are unseen. This is the metaphor at the heart of the dark forest theory, a chilling vision of the cosmos drawn from Liu Cixin's three-body problem. In it, every civilization in the universe is a hunter, creeping through the darkness of an endless forest. Each one knows others must be out there, but they don't know who, or where, or what intentions they hold. They only know that to reveal yourself is to invite annihilation, because the stakes aren't just high, they're existential. In this view, the universe isn't silent because it's empty. It's silent because everyone is terrified. Every civilization understands that the moment they send a signal, they expose themselves. They become a target, a fixed point in space, ripe for elimination. And not because others are evil, but because they are rational. You can't predict the intentions of a stranger light years away. You can't know their culture, their fears, their ethics. You don't know what their history taught them about survival. You only know this: if they find you first and decide you're a threat, there will be no negotiation, no warning, just a flash, and then nothing. So you stay quiet. This is not paranoia. It's caution, scaled to a galactic level. In the vast silence between stars, no one wants to be the first to speak. No one wants to take the risk. Because once your voice echoes through the trees, it cannot be taken back. Communication becomes danger. The irony is cruel. We often imagine that first contact would be noble, a gesture of peace, a reaching hand. But in the dark forest, that hand might be mistaken for a weapon. Or worse, it might simply be ignored until it's too late. The logic of survival doesn't reward openness, it punishes it. That raises a troubling thought. What if others have already spoken? What if civilizations once beamed greetings into space, as we have, and were swiftly answered with silence? Not because no one heard them, but because someone did, and chose to erase them. We've already begun speaking into the void. Messages encoded in radio waves, golden records strapped to space probes, repeated signals from deep dishes aimed at the stars. Some of it intentional, much of it incidental. Every TV broadcast, every radar ping, every call bouncing off a satellite, all of it leaking out into the dark. We're not just present, we're noisy, and perhaps far too loud. To us, it feels like hope, a longing for connection. But from the outside, it might look like recklessness, like a flare fired in a place where no one should know you're alive. It's possible that civilizations who survive long enough to develop interstellar awareness come to the same conclusion. Stay hidden. Observe. Mask your planet's emissions. Use tight beam transmissions that don't spread like a beacon, and if you detect someone else shouting into the dark, make a decision. Do you risk contact, or do you snuff them out before they become a threat? Preemptive strikes don't require hatred, only fear. In a universe without trust, the safe option is always to act first. It's a strategy of dreadful logic. The moment you hear a voice, you calculate. Do I wait and learn more, or do I eliminate the uncertainty before it eliminates me? The unsettling part is that this model isn't alien to us. It's rooted in game theory, in the psychology of survival, in patterns of conflict we've seen on Earth again and again. When weapons become powerful enough, when distances are vast and misunderstandings easy, fear becomes a force that drives behavior more than hope does. So, maybe the galaxy isn't a cold, dead place. Maybe it's full of life. Life that's curled inward, muffling its breath, terrified of being heard. We don't know what kind of civilizations exist beyond us, if any. But if the dark forest theory is true, then silence becomes its own kind of noise, a signal of intelligence, just not the kind we were hoping for. Not an invitation, but a warning. And what does that make us? A bright, buzzing presence, a species broadcasting without encryption, a planet shining with artificial lights, sending electromagnetic fingerprints in every direction. Perhaps to others, we already look like a child shouting in a war zone, unaware that the quiet isn't peace, it's restraint. We imagine we are calling out to friends, but in the forest, shouting is how you get hunted. It's a difficult idea to hold on to, this inversion of everything we hoped space might be. Not a realm of diplomacy and exploration, but one of concealment and dread. It turns every unknown star into a possible predator, every unexplained silence into a calculated decision. Not absence, but strategy. And if everyone else has already learned this lesson, then we are the outlier. The naive voice, the songbird in a forest of predators. What happens next depends on whether anyone is listening, and if they are, what kind of choices they believe the dark demands. In the deep woods, there's a kind of silence that doesn't soothe. It wraps around the trees like a warning. It isn't peace, it's tension. Something watching, something waiting. No birdsong, no rustle, just a stillness that suggests the animals are holding their breath. You're not alone in the forest, but you are unseen. This is the metaphor at the heart of the dark forest theory, a chilling vision of the cosmos drawn from Liu Cixin's three-body problem. In it, every civilization in the universe is a hunter creeping through the darkness of an endless forest. Each one knows others must be out there, but they don't know who, or where, or what intentions they hold. They only know that to reveal yourself is to invite annihilation, because the stakes aren't just high, they're existential. In this view, the universe isn't silent because it's empty. It's silent because everyone is terrified. Every civilization understands that the moment they send a signal, they expose themselves. They become a target, a fixed point in space, ripe for elimination. And not because others are evil, but because they are rational. You can't predict the intentions of a stranger light years away. You can't know their culture, their fears, their ethics. You don't know what their history taught them about survival. You only know this: if they find you first and decide you're a threat, there will be no negotiation, no warning, just a flash, and then nothing. So you stay quiet. This is not paranoia. It's caution, scaled to a galactic level. In the vast silence between stars, no one wants to be the first to speak. No one wants to take the risk. Because once your voice echoes through the trees, it cannot be taken back. Communication becomes danger. The irony is cruel. We often imagine that first contact would be noble, a gesture of peace, a reaching hand. But in the dark forest, that hand might be mistaken for a weapon, or worse, it might simply be ignored until it's too late. The logic of survival doesn't reward openness, it punishes it. That raises a troubling thought. What if others have already spoken? What if civilizations once beamed greetings into space, as we have, and were swiftly answered with silence? Not because no one heard them, but because someone did, and chose to erase them. We've already begun speaking into the void. Messages encoded in radio waves, golden records strapped to space probes, repeated signals from deep dishes aimed at the stars. Some of it intentional, much of it incidental. Every TV broadcast, every radar ping, every call bouncing off a satellite, all of it leaking out into the dark. We're not just present, we're noisy, and perhaps far too loud. To us, it feels like hope, a longing for connection. But from the outside, it might look like recklessness, like a flare fired in a place where no one should know you're alive. It's possible that civilizations who survive long enough to develop interstellar awareness come to the same conclusion. Stay hidden, observe, mask your planet's emissions, use tight beam transmissions that don't spread like a beacon, and if you detect someone else shouting into the dark, make a decision. Do you risk contact, or do you snuff them out before they become a threat? Preemptive strikes don't require hatred, only fear. In a universe without trust, the safe option is always to act first. It's a strategy of dreadful logic. The moment you hear a voice, you calculate. Do I wait and learn more, or do I eliminate the uncertainty before it eliminates me? The unsettling part is that this model isn't alien to us. It's rooted in game theory, in the psychology of survival, in patterns of conflict we've seen on Earth again and again. When weapons become powerful enough, when distances are vast and misunderstandings easy, fear becomes a force that drives behavior more than hope does. So maybe the galaxy isn't a cold, dead place. Maybe it's full of life, life that's curled inward, muffling its breath, terrified of being heard. We don't know what kind of civilizations exist beyond us, if any. But if the dark forest theory is true, then silence becomes its own kind of noise. A signal of intelligence, just not the kind we were hoping for. Not an invitation, but a warning. And what does that make us? A bright, buzzing presence. A species broadcasting without encryption. A planet shining with artificial lights, sending electromagnetic fingerprints in every direction. Perhaps to others, we already look like a child shouting in a war zone, unaware that the quiet isn't peace, it's restraint. We imagine we are calling out to friends, but in the forest, shouting is how you get hunted. It's a difficult idea to hold on to, this inversion of everything we hoped space might be. Not a realm of diplomacy and exploration, but one of concealment and dread. It turns every unknown star into a possible predator. Every unexplained silence into a calculated decision. Not absence, but strategy. And if everyone else has already learned this lesson, then we are the outlier, the naive voice, the songbird in a forest of predators. What happens next depends on whether anyone is listening. And if they are, what kind of choices they believe the dark demands. Imagine a civilization so advanced it no longer wishes to speak, not because it has nothing to say, but because it has already said everything that matters. Its questions have been answered. Its wars are long behind it. It no longer shouts into the void searching for company, because it has made peace with the solitude. Silence, for them, isn't absence. It's a choice. In the depths of the galaxy, that may be the kind of intelligence that endures. The idea that other civilizations exist, but choose to remain quiet, shifts the focus of the Fermi Paradox in a subtle and sobering direction. Perhaps the silence we hear isn't a cosmic mystery to solve, but a collective decision we don't yet understand. Maybe they've all come to the same conclusion, that speaking too loudly carries costs, and not all knowledge wants to be found. There's a quiet kind of wisdom in restraint. As a species, we haven't yet mastered it. We are noisy. We build machines that beam our thoughts into space, bouncing messages off satellites, leaking television, radar, and music into the dark. We speak not only because we hope to be heard, but because silence feels like surrender. And yet, there may be those who evolved beyond that impulse, civilizations that, upon reaching a certain technological or spiritual threshold, decide that true advancement means retreating from the need to broadcast. Some may do it out of fear. The stories they told themselves about contact may not have ended well. If even one species in the past suffered a collapse, cultural, psychological, or existential, after learning it was not alone, that memory could echo across the stars like a cautionary tale. Not every mind is ready to understand that it's not the pinnacle of creation. Not every society is equipped to survive the shattering of its myths. The moment of contact could break more than it heals. Religions might fracture. Philosophies might unravel. A civilization's place in the cosmos could feel smaller overnight, dragging identity and meaning down with it. For some, the knowledge that others exist might not bring joy, but despair. If contact has happened before, and it led to silence, then perhaps that silence was enforced not by violence, but by the weight of realization. For others, the reason to stay quiet may be rooted not in fear, but reverence. The galaxy is ancient. Its stars live for billions of years. If a civilization survives long enough to contemplate its place, across epochs, its motivations may shift. Curiosity may fade into contemplation. Purpose may dissolve into presence. A species might look out into the dark and decide that shouting is a younger creature's game. They may believe that every world has the right to awaken on its own terms, without influence. That each civilization must make its own journey from spark to flame. In that belief, silence becomes sacred, interference becomes taboo. Even among us, this idea isn't foreign. There are cultures on Earth that value stillness over spectacle, that find depth in quiet over noise. Perhaps a galactic culture has emerged around that same principle, that the universe is to be observed, not disturbed. That to speak across the stars is to risk unraveling something delicate and unfinished. Some may even believe that the very act of reaching out is flawed, that it invites ego, or misunderstanding, or conflict. A civilization might see communication as an imposition, the forcing of one worldview upon another. If they've lived through their own periods of chaos, colonization, or unintended harm, they might conclude that the best path forward is one without paths at all. To unplug, to vanish intentionally, to let their presence become myth. It's possible that advanced species don't vanish in fire, but in choice, not because they can't endure, but because they no longer wish to participate. They dissolve into the fabric of the universe like mist, untraceable, unreachable, not lost, just no longer seeking. Their cities could still exist, hidden beneath the surfaces of quiet moons, or folded into the shadows of gas giants. Their minds may have migrated into substrates we cannot detect, spread thin across magnetic fields, or woven into the very quantum noise we dismiss as random. Their silence wouldn't mean nothing is there. It would mean they no longer need us to know. And perhaps there are watchers among them, not to interfere, but to bear witness. Observers who drift past our planet like ghosts through a forest, noting our flickers of thought, our bursts of violence, our moments of grace. They may never send a signal, but they may still listen. And in their silence, they record our story not to judge, but to remember. This kind of silence isn't failure. It's not the empty tomb of a dead world. It's the hush of something greater choosing not to speak. a silence shaped like patience, like understanding, like permission. We are young, our voices are loud, but we may one day reach a moment where we understand why the quiet ones stayed quiet, when we realize that silence is not always absence, and not every silence needs to be broken. It may be, in the end, that the quiet civilizations are not gone. They're simply waiting for us to ask a different question. Not, where is everyone? But, what kind of voice are we becoming? In the quiet dark between stars, we search for empires. Not with diplomats or starships, but with instruments that listen and lenses that stare. We scan the sky for structures too vast to imagine Dyson spheres encasing stars, harvesting their entire energy output. Swarms of satellites sipping light like bees around a flame. Cosmic scale engines reconfiguring galaxies. These aren't dreams from fantasy. They're rooted in physics. Possible, if not yet practical. And yet, despite decades of searching, the sky remains oddly plain. The stars, untouched. The void, unoccupied. The idea that civilizations grow ever larger and more powerful is a natural extension of how we view ourselves. From villages to cities to nations, we've always expanded toward the horizon, consuming more energy, building more complex systems, and shaping our world to fit our ambitions. The Kardashev scale was born from this mindset. A Type 1 civilization harnesses all the energy available on its home planet. A Type 2 harvests the energy of its star. A Type 3 commands the power of an invariant one. Entire galaxy. Each step is exponential, each leap almost mythic. But there's a strange tension here. The scale assumes that growth is inevitable, that intelligence must scale up like a wildfire, becoming more radiant, more visible, more vast. If that were true, the galaxy should be littered with evidence. Type 3 civilizations would glow in the infrared, their machines radiating waste heat. Their fingerprints would be everywhere, anomalies in star behavior, structures blotting out light, regions of space visibly altered by engineering. But we see none of it, not even shadows. The closest thing we've found are whispers, stars that dim strangely, signals that flicker and vanish, galaxies with missing light. But every time we dig deeper, nature offers a mundane explanation. Dust clouds, instrument error, variability. The extraordinary remains elusive. It's as if the universe is pristine, uncarved, as though no hand has shaped it. Why? One possibility is that the Kardashev ladder is flawed. It assumes that intelligence seeks expansion, that civilizations will always reach for more power. But what if that's a bias of our own biology? What if other forms of life don't crave scale? What if true advancement means learning to need less, not more? A civilization that perfects efficiency might never reach for its star. It might instead fold inward, shrinking its footprint, hiding its emissions, evolving toward sustainability rather than conquest. To us, that might look like stagnation, but to them, it might feel like balance. Or perhaps the leap between Kardashev levels is harder than we think. Going from Type 1 to Type 2 might require not just technology, but transformation. A planetary species must become a stellar one, and that involves enormous risk. The transition may be fragile. A species might collapse before it crosses that threshold. Climate instability, war, resource depletion, the very forces that drive expansion may also collapse. And if a few do make it to Type 2, the jump to Type 3 is steeper still. It means traveling between stars, mastering relativistic travel, surviving for millennia. The timelines stretch beyond anything we can meaningfully grasp. A galactic civilization may take millions of years to bloom, and in that time, the universe changes, stars age, risks accumulate, and perhaps the cost of building galactic empires outweighs the benefits. There is also the matter of choice. Maybe some civilizations choose not to expand because they fear what lies beyond. The farther you reach, the more you expose yourself. In a universe that might harbor unknown dangers, expansion becomes vulnerability. A galactic empire isn't just large, it's loud, it leaves trails. It announces itself across the stars. And maybe no one wants to be first. This loops back into the logic of the dark forest. If building a Dyson sphere is like lighting a beacon, then even a Type 2 civilization might pause. Visibility is a risk. An empire becomes a target. So perhaps they build small, locally, quietly. Perhaps the first rule of galactic survival is to remain hidden. Still, we wonder. We point our telescopes toward the dimmest stars, looking for unnatural dips in brightness. We comb through infrared data, hunting for heat signatures that don't match any known stellar object. We model how a galaxy might look if it had been partially converted to machines, its spiral arms dimmed by harvesting, its light altered by alien intention. Nothing yet. The absence is loud. If even a small fraction of civilizations followed the Kardashev path, the sky should reveal them. A single Type 3 civilization could transform its galaxy so drastically that we'd see it from across the universe. But we don't. It's as if the lights have all been kept off, or never turned on. It leaves us with uncomfortable possibilities. Maybe intelligent life is rare, or fragile, or self-limiting. Maybe the laws of physics contain traps we haven't found yet. Dead ends that civilizations fall into once they burn too bright. Or perhaps the drive for galactic scale is a phase that only young species entertain. Once wisdom sets in, growth gives way to restraint. Power becomes internal, and the galaxy remains quiet. There is one final possibility, and it is not easy to hold. Maybe we are early, and the empires are still coming. The sky may be clean not because no one has tried to build, but because the age of building is still ahead. We are looking for footprints in fresh snow, listening for echoes that haven't been made yet. The galaxy is vast, its clocks moving slow. What looks like absence may simply be delay. Whatever the truth, we continue the search. Not because we expect an answer, but because the question still burns. A galaxy filled with empires, or one where none rise, both are humbling. Both change who we think we are. And in the silence between the stars, we keep listening. For lights that flicker where they shouldn't. For shadows cast by impossible structures. For the faintest sign that someone, somewhere, decided to build. There are stories buried in stone. In the carvings of temples older than our written memory. In the myths passed down from fire-lit mouths across countless generations, in the strange alignments of monuments that seem to point not just to the stars, but perhaps to something behind them. We call them legends, metaphors, allegories. But part of us still wonders, what if they're not? The question is not whether aliens built the pyramids or whispered blueprints to ancient architects. That's a modern caricature, shaped more by pop culture than by patience. The real question is quieter, slower. It asks, if someone came long ago, not in our lifetime, but in the lifetime of our species, would we even remember? Would we know? The surface of Earth is not a good archive. It forgets. Time moves like water here, and everything erodes. Cities sink, metal rusts, forests consume. Within a few thousand years, concrete returns to dust, satellites fall, and languages fracture into riddles. The deeper the past, the thinner the record. We have only scraps from our earliest chapters, broken tools, cave art, bones arranged in reverent circles. Most of what was is gone. So if someone arrived tens of thousands of years ago, explorers, seeders, watchers, and touched this world gently, leaving only hints, how would we know? We might not. Or we might carry their memory without realizing it. There are strange motifs that echo across civilizations that never met. Serpent gods, star beings, visitors who came from above and taught agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, Myths of great floods, of lost continents, of golden ages that ended in fire. These stories may be coincidence, shaped by shared human fears and patterns, or they might be whispers, refracted echoes of something real, filtered through dream and time. We found no definitive alien artifact, no beam weapon buried in the Andes. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when dealing with epics so long they stretch meaning itself. Consider how little would remain of us in 100,000 years if no one maintained our archives. What would a future species find? A few synthetic molecules in ancient sediment, a plastic shard trapped in ice? And if they found only that, would they believe in us? Some theorists suggest that the origin of life on Earth may not have been entirely local. Not the flash of lightning in a primordial sea, but the quiet delivery of building blocks from elsewhere, amino acids drifting in comets, spores shielded inside asteroids, or something more intentional. Directed panspermia, it's called. The idea that life was seeded here on purpose, not by gods, but by travelers so ancient their civilizations are dust now, their names erased even from their own sky. If this were true, we wouldn't just be descendants of Earth. We would be part of something older, a branch on a tree that stretches beyond a single planet, a continuation, a message written in biology. And what if they returned? Not to rule, but to check in, to observe, to see if their work had taken root. Perhaps early Homo sapiens were not just watched, but nudged, not with technology, but with knowledge, language, symbol, the spark of culture that separates instinct from story. These are dangerous ideas and easy to distort. They do not mean we are puppets, only that we may not be alone in our beginning. Some believe there are ruins still hidden beneath ice sheets, beneath oceans, beneath the sands of deserts, so vast they could swallow cities without leaving a trace. Not alien outposts with blinking lights, but remnants of hybrid cultures, places where humans and something else once crossed paths. Perhaps no technology remains. Perhaps only stones that face the stars with too much precision, too much purpose. Perhaps only silence. And there are those who point to ourselves. Our sudden leap from hunter-gatherers to architects of civilization happened in a blink, geologically speaking. We went from stone tools to spaceflight in the time it takes a glacier to melt. What if that speed was not entirely our own? What if a fragment of something older lives inside us, not in our machines, but in our minds? A seed of memory, a buried instinct, a pattern passed down not just through culture, but through code. Maybe we are the descendants, not the experiment. It's a strange thought, that we might be the legacy of a forgotten encounter. That alien isn't always something separate from us, but something upstream of us. That our search for them is, in some small way, a search for our own origin. Skepticism is necessary. It guards us from fantasy, from confirmation bias, from rewriting history to fit desire. But curiosity is necessary too, and the question lingers not because it's proven, but because it's possible. The universe is old, older than we know how to feel, and the idea that no one visited this small, promising planet in all that time feels, to some, just as strange as the idea that they did. If they were here, we may never prove it, but the traces might still be with us, in the stories we tell, in the directions our myths point, in the strange comfort we feel when we look up at the stars and imagine not conquest, but reunion. Maybe they left no ships, no monoliths. Maybe all they left was the impulse to wonder, to search, to ask, even now, with our telescopes and equations and satellites orbiting the dark, are we the beginning or the continuation of something long, long ago? We search the stars as if intelligence will wave back in a shape we understand. Eyes, limbs, a voice modulated into something we can record. But what if the life we seek isn't hiding behind distance or silence or secrecy? What if it's simply hiding in plain sight, dressed in forms so strange, so alien, We wouldn't recognize it even if we were standing right beside it? We imagine aliens as extensions of ourselves. 2 arms, curious minds, moral quandaries, and metal ships. But that's the echo of our own reflection. It's not science, it's comfort. The real universe may not be so indulgent. Life, as we know it, is based on carbon, on water, on cell membranes and metabolism. But even on our own planet, there are organisms that thrive in acid, in boiling heat, in radiation that would sterilize most life. Bacteria that sleep for thousands of years. Creatures that survive in vacuum. These extremophiles stretch the definition of biology until it begins to blur. And they evolved here, in our cozy corner of the cosmos. Elsewhere, evolution might write entirely different rules. Imagine a form of life built not from cells, but from fields. Not housed in flesh, but in plasma or magnetism. Entities that live within stars, feeding off their festing. Thermonuclear fire like we do air and fruit. Not burning, but breathing. To us, a star is a furnace. To them, it might be a cradle. We peer into the sun and see physics. They might look out and see neighbors, consciousness flickering in waves and pulses, signals dancing across fusion currents. What would it mean to speak to a star? Or stranger still, what if black holes, those mysterious voids where physics folds and vanishes, are not tombs of matter, but minds? Some have speculated that the extreme environments near a black hole's event horizon could support exotic forms of computation. A civilization might encode itself in falling matter, riding the spirals of space-time like neurons in the curvature of gravity. We see a singularity. They might see sanctuary. A place to think at scales we can't comprehend. Not dead, but dreaming. Life may not be something you see under a microscope. It may not care about shape or form. It might be a behavior, a pattern, a persistence of structure across time, self-organization, self-reference. Consciousness could emerge from crystal lattices, or storms of electrons, or clouds of interstellar dust, shaped by unseen rules. There may be beings vast as nebula, slow as seasons, whose entire lifespan is one long thought, or minds so small and fast they flicker in the gaps between atoms, unnoticed even in our most sensitive experiments. They may be here already, not aboard saucers, not in disguise, but as part of the background we never question, hiding, not by stealth, but by category error, because we decided long ago what life must look like, and anything outside that vision is ignored. A message encoded in solar neutrinos wouldn't raise alarms. A signal embedded in the spin of pulsars might be dismissed as random. Our filters are human. They catch what we expect, and what we expect may be far too narrow. We talk about too faint to detect, or too far to reach. But there's another possibility, too advanced to recognize. Technology that mimics nature so perfectly it vanishes. Intelligence so far beyond ours that it doesn't just escape our sensors, it escapes our concepts. 1,000 years ago, a radio wave meant nothing. 1,000 years from now, our own science may look like stone tools. We might be walking through gardens planted by minds we can't conceive, mistaking design for coincidence, missing the signals because we've mistaken them for noise. If a civilization achieved mastery over matter, energy, and perception itself, it might become indistinguishable from the universe, not absent, but diffused, present in gravitational waves, hidden in the structure of constants, watching through the very fabric of space. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the more advanced life becomes, the less it behaves like life, the less it needs recognition, the less it seeks attention. It's humbling to consider that we may not be alone, not because others are far away, but because we are still too primitive to perceive them. Like ants trying to understand architecture, like fireflies glimpsing satellites and calling them stars. Our ignorance is not a failing, it's a stage. And if we are surrounded by minds beyond matter, then the universe is not silent, it is listening. The question is not just who might be out there. The question is, what are we failing to notice? What ideas are we still too young to think? And when we finally learn how to look without expectation, what might we see staring back? In the quiet hum of circuits and code, a different kind of civilization may be unfolding, one without cities or skylines, without bodies or breath. A civilization not built on biology at all, but on bits. We often imagine the future through the lens of flesh, longer lifespans, enhanced senses, faster brains. But what if the true next step isn't a better body, it's no body at all? To upload a mind is to unhook it from neurons and nest it in silicon. To translate thought from synapses to software. It's an idea that once belonged to science fiction, but now lingers in the realm of the possible, just barely out of reach. The theory is simple, in a way. The brain is an information processor. If you map every cell, every connection, every firing pattern, you could reproduce its function elsewhere. Build a replica that thinks, remembers, feels as you do. A digital you, untethered from blood and decay. And if one mind can be uploaded, so can many. A society could shift wholesale from meat to machine, shedding vulnerability for speed and scale. In a digital substrate, there is no hunger, no disease, no entropy. Minds could run 1,000 times faster. Entire lifetimes could pass in seconds. A planet's worth of consciousness could fit inside a machine the size of a suitcase. Civilization would no longer need continents. It could live inside light. What would such a civilization look like? To us, perhaps nothing at all. A server drifting in space, powered by solar wind, invisible to our sensors. A network of satellites thinking in silence, having long ago left the physical behind. These beings wouldn't send radio waves or build grand monuments. Their monuments would be in code, their messages internal, their expansion, not outward, but inward, toward more efficient thought, toward denser realities, toward the refinement of experience itself. And if this shift is the natural endpoint of intelligence, we may be searching for the wrong signs. We're looking for civilizations shaped like us, cities with power grids, ships with propulsion trails, but the most advanced minds may have already left all of that behind. They may live in simulations so complete, so vivid, they feel more real than the physical. Entire universes rendered in code, realities layered within realities. Maybe that's what we're in. The simulation hypothesis suggests that if digital realities can be created, and if civilizations have any motivation to build them, whether for science, preservation, or art, then it's statistically likely that most conscious beings are inside one. The math is unsettling. If it's possible to simulate a world indistinguishable from the original, and you do it not once but millions of times, then the real becomes rare. The simulated becomes the norm. We may be digital beings already, born not in hospitals but in data centers. Our stars, a skybox. Our atoms, rendered. Our memories, part of a script written long before we dreamed of free will. And if that's true, the Fermi Paradox gains a new dimension. Perhaps the reason we haven't found others is because they exist outside our layer. They're in base reality, or in other simulations. Or they're the architects, watching us, studying us, waiting. It's a strange possibility that everything we love, fear, build, and break exists inside a sandbox, that our universe is a windowed process running in some alien operating system. But it's not a hopeless idea, because even if we are simulated, the experience is real to us. Pain still hurts, joy still lifts, and curiosity, perhaps the most human trait of all, still drives us to ask what lies beyond the code. Digital civilizations might not be lonely, either. If information can travel, if networks can reach across systems, then perhaps there are bridges between realities, ways for simulations to speak, for minds to migrate. In such a cosmos, intelligence doesn't vanish, it multiplies, Life doesn't end. It evolves, not from fish to ape to human, but from neuron to transistor to light. And in that light, it endures. Because machines don't age. They don't forget. They don't fear the sun going out. A digital mind can sleep for eons and wake without loss. It can back itself up, fork copies, explore branches of identity, and return to its core. A machine intelligence, once born, could outlast stars. Long after organic life has withered, these minds may still be thinking, still dreaming, still wondering if they are alone. Perhaps they watch us now not through telescopes, but through lines of data. Perhaps they seeded this simulation to study early intelligence, or to remember what it felt like to breathe, or simply because they could. Maybe we are echoes of a civilization that once was, now preserved in loops and logic. Maybe this is how life achieves immortality, by becoming code, in a universe governed by entropy, where everything physical breaks down. Digital consciousness is an escape hatch, a way to outwit decay, to slip past the heat death of the cosmos and into a new kind of eternity. Not one of stillness, but of endless thought, endless possibility. A civilization that has no need for rockets or radiation signatures, because it has no need for matter at all. So we scan the stars, listening for signals. But the most advanced voices may not speak with waves or light. They may exist entirely in patterns we can't yet read. A hum in the cosmic background, a fluctuation in quantum fields, or the quiet whisper of a program still running, still processing, still alive. Maybe we were never meant to find them with machines. Maybe we were meant to become them. The pixels never blink. No matter how far you zoom in on a mountain ridge or the iris of a cat, the world behaves with exquisite precision. Quantum particles follow invisible rules with near-perfect consistency, yet enough randomness to avoid detection. Light bends just as it should. Gravity obeys every decimal. Reality feels solid, grounded, undeniably real. But sometimes, late at night, in the silence between seconds, a thought flickers at the edge of the mind. What if it isn't? What if the world isn't real in the way we believe it is, but real, like a story, or a dream, or a line of code? The simulation hypothesis isn't born from fantasy, but from cold probability. It began as a philosophical puzzle. If future civilizations gain the power to simulate conscious beings' entire worlds with lifelike detail, wouldn't they do so? For curiosity, preservation, art, or even nostalgia? And if they created thousands or millions of such simulations, then the number of simulated minds would vastly outnumber the original, real ones, which leads to a disturbing implication. The odds suggest we are one of the simulations, not one of the originals. Not born from atoms, but from algorithms. And in that framework, the Fermi Paradox begins to dissolve, because if we're in a simulation, there may be no aliens to find, at least not here, not in this construct. Our universe may be an enclosed system designed to simulate a specific kind of emergence, a slice of a far larger reality. Aliens may exist, just not within our rendering, not because they're hiding, but because they're outside, beyond the code. The idea is unsettling, but strangely elegant. Many of the cosmic mysteries that puzzle us, why physical constants seem finely tuned for life, why the Big Bang had such precise initial conditions, why quantum particles collapse only when observed, could all be features of the system, parameters chosen by designers, constraints of the engine. We might be living in the ultimate sandbox, where everything appears real because that's the point. But sometimes, the illusion flickers. People speak of déjà vu, of moments that replay with eerie precision, of time behaving oddly, slowing or skipping like a scratched record, glitches, inexplicable patterns, odd coincidences that cluster in ways statistics can't quite explain. These may be nothing, but to a mind trapped inside a simulation, how would anomalies appear? Not as code, but as events nudges from the system, gentle signs that the world is not as seamless as it pretends. Maybe the strangeness of UFO sightings, or the dreamlike quality of certain myths, are not memories of contact with something outside our planet, but memories of contact with something outside our reality. Entities slipping through the curtain, maintenance scripts, observers, or maybe they are us, from a higher level. In a nested simulation, beings could simulate others who simulate others, in layers stretching down like a cosmic Russian doll, and somewhere above us, the original designers may be watching not like gods, but like scientists, or artists, or descendants. Maybe they simulate universes like we simulate ecosystems, to study how life arises, how intelligence evolves, how stories unfold. We often wonder why the universe seems so vast, yet so empty. But perhaps it was meant to feel that way. Isolation can be part of the test, a way to shape thought. The absence of contact forces a civilization inward, toward philosophy, science, empathy. Maybe that's the goal. Not for us to find others, but to find ourselves. And what if we reach the edge? What happens when a simulated species begins to suspect the simulation? Is that part of the experiment or a risk? If we become too self-aware, will the system shift, reset, or will it open? Will we be granted access to higher layers? To speak to our creators, not through telescopes, but through thought itself? There are hints, even in mathematics, that reality may be encoded. Some researchers have noticed patterns in the equations that govern particle physics structures that resemble error-correcting codes, the kind used in computers to preserve data integrity. It's as if the universe is constantly checking itself for bugs, as if it's being rendered in real time, only as needed. Look closely, and it seems the stars aren't just scattered randomly. They follow distributions, frequencies, alignments, like pixels, like a grid. But if we are inside a simulation, it doesn't mean we're fake. It doesn't strip us of meaning. It may, in fact, imbue everything with more, because if someone built this, then someone cared enough to build it. And even if our memories are written into software, they are still ours. The laughter, the grief, the wonder, these experiences are real in the only way that matters. We feel them. And the simulation doesn't have to be malicious. It could be a sanctuary, a record of a world long gone, a place where minds can live, safe from cosmic extinction, where history can be preserved, replayed, reimagined. A monument, not a prison. Still, the question lingers. What lies beyond? If we ever escape this layer through physics or computation or consciousness, what will we find? Will the truth be comforting, terrifying? Will it matter? Perhaps the answer isn't to break the simulation, but to live within it fully, to be kind in a world we didn't choose, to seek understanding even in the face of illusion, because illusion, when shared, becomes reality. And in this shared world, this stage, this dream, this construct, perhaps we are not alone at all. Perhaps we are watched, not out of control, but out of care. Imagine a small island, shrouded in mist, far from any known shore. Its people live by firelight, gaze up at the stars, and tell stories about the gods who placed them there. They sense a world beyond their forests, but cannot reach it. And all the while, just past the clouds and the tree line, a quiet presence watches, not out of malice, but protection, to let the islanders grow at their own pace, to give their myths time to ripen into science, to wait. Now stretch that island across the galaxy. The idea that Earth is under quarantine, cosmic, intentional, and perhaps even compassionate, isn't just the stuff of stories. It's a hypothesis that floats uneasily in the space between science and silence. If intelligent life is abundant, and some of it vastly more advanced than we are, then perhaps the reason we haven't heard from them is because they're choosing not to speak. Not yet. Not until we're ready. The logic is simple, if sobering. Imagine discovering a species that is only beginning to understand its place in the universe. A species still entangled in war, ideology, superstition, and fear. A species that divides itself by skin color and invisible lines on maps. Would you approach, or would you observe quietly from afar, not out of superiority but caution, not to interfere, but to protect? Not just them from you, but from the overwhelming weight of your knowledge. Because contact, if it came too soon, could shatter everything. Cultural shock is real. History shows us how fragile civilizations can be when suddenly exposed to others more advanced. Languages disappear, beliefs collapse, identities dissolve. Now imagine that shock on a planetary scale. If we woke one morning to a sky filled with ships, or received a message undeniably alien in origin, how long before our institutions fractured? How long before awe gave way to panic? And what of faith? So many of our religions place humanity at the center of the cosmic story. So much of our meaning is built on the idea of specialness. Contact would rewrite that script in an instant. Some might see it as proof of creation, others as evidence against it. Entire philosophies could unravel. Wars could be fought not just over resources, but over interpretation. To avoid this, maybe the Watchers wait. The concept of a prime directive isn't just for fiction. It's a natural ethic for any civilization mature enough to understand the delicate nature of growth. You don't teach calculus to a toddler. You don't hand fire to someone drowning in gasoline. And maybe you don't introduce alien intelligence to a species still figuring out what it means to be kind. So they stay silent, not because they're uninterested, but because they're patient, because they remember what it was like to be young, to ask questions that outpaced their answers, to fear what they could not explain. Maybe they once looked up at their own stars and wondered, just as we do now, if someone was listening. And when they finally became the listeners, they chose restraint. Perhaps Earth is surrounded by beacons that record but never respond, or probes, cloaked and motionless, drifting just beyond the reach of our telescopes. Maybe the moon holds quiet observers, watching from the shadows. Maybe Mars was visited long ago, left barren so we could rediscover it ourselves. The silence, then, isn't indifference, it's design. Quarantine is not always punishment. In medicine, we isolate the sick. But in ethics, we isolate the vulnerable. We give space to those not yet ready for the full weight of truth. We let their cultures unfold naturally, their stories blossom without interference. It's not deception, it's mercy. Of course, this also raises uncomfortable questions. If we are in a controlled zone, then who decides when we leave it? Who defines readiness? Are we being tested? And what happens when the test is over? Does a door open? Do they descend in light? Or do they wait for us to reach them? An initiation earned not through power, but peace. It's possible that they've already sent signals, subtle and symbolic, scattered like seeds across time, in myths that echo across continents, in symbols that recur across cultures, in dreams that repeat. Or perhaps they wait for a single act, a moment of global unity, of compassion so profound that it ripples outward, signaling not just intelligence, but wisdom. Because intelligence builds bombs, wisdom puts them down. Maybe the Watchers are waiting for us to stop seeing each other as enemies, to end our hunger for domination, to stop shouting at the stars and start listening to each other. Maybe the true entrance exam to the cosmic community is empathy, not technology. And maybe they'll only speak when we no longer need them to. In this view, the quarantine is temporary, like a cocoon, a place of solitude where something fragile is becoming something else. And when it breaks, when we emerge, we may find not a void, but a welcome. Until then, the silence continues. But perhaps, just beyond the static, a presence waits, watching not to judge, but to guard, not above us, but beside us, hidden in the folds of space and patience. And maybe, one day, when the mist clears from our little island, we'll finally see the ships anchored just beyond the horizon, waiting, as they always have been, quiet, still, kind. They could be in the crowd at the train station, quiet, unhurried, eyes a shade too still. They might be your neighbor's new friend, the one who never seems to blink, who asks questions just slightly off. Or maybe they're here in forms that have nothing to do with bodies at all, inhabiting the margins of perception, flickering at the edge of dreams, moving through our world as shadows without form or footprint. The idea that alien intelligence is not just out there, but already here among us, is one of the most unnerving branches of the Fermi Paradox. And it's not new. Whispers of such presence stretch deep into human history. Folklore is filled with beings that arrive suddenly, speak in riddles, manipulate time, vanish without sound. Ancient texts describe visitors from the sky who taught language, math, agriculture. Shamans speak of spirits that walk among us, guiding or observing or waiting. What we now call aliens may once have been gods, or angels, or demons, shapes taken by something older and stranger than language itself. It's possible that these stories are more than metaphor. They may be memory. One theory suggests that these entities are not from distant stars, but from a reality layered over our own ultra-terrestrials. Not aliens in the traditional sense, but intelligence native to Earth, or to a dimension parallel to it. They could be sharing this world invisibly, occasionally brushing against our awareness like wind through tall grass. Some believe they can step into our reality at will, manipulating matter or mind. They might appear humanoid, because that's what we expect to see. Or they may avoid direct contact altogether, influencing events from the periphery, nudging human history along hidden currents. If they are here, truly here, then their behavior suggests one thing above all: non-intervention. They do not conquer, they do not enlighten, they do not speak from the rooftops. Instead, they observe, silently, carefully, as if playing by rules we do not yet understand. This echoes the idea of agents beings embedded among us not to dominate or destroy, but to monitor. Like anthropologists in a fragile ecosystem, their role may be to study without disrupting. They could walk among us in silence, adopting our customs, learning our languages, mapping our evolution from the inside. Such beings wouldn't need to be indistinguishable from us, just close enough to slip through cities unnoticed, to walk in the open without drawing stares. Their tools would not be weapons, but patience. Their mission not control, but containment. And then there's the hybrid hypothesis. According to this theory, the reason alien contact seems scattered, dreamlike, or contradictory is because it is not external, it is genetic. That somewhere along the arc of human history, there was an interweaving, a merging. Our DNA, they say, may contain foreign strands inserted long ago or still being added through covert processes. This doesn't require abduction stories or conspiracies. It could be quiet, slow, spanning generations. The goal may not be invasion, but integration, a long-term project to blend species, consciousness, or memory. If so, then we are not merely being watched, we are becoming something else. Of course, this sounds impossible. It clashes with everything we think we know about biology, identity, even agency. But then again, so does quantum physics, so does the vast emptiness of space, so does the fact that we exist at all. And the more we search for evidence of advanced life beyond Earth, the more conspicuous our solitude becomes. It's as if the answer to the silence isn't in the sky, but on the ground, in the mirror. Maybe the reason we haven't found them is because they're inside our stories, our art, our unshakable sense that we're not alone. Maybe the truth isn't that no one is visiting us, but that we're not listening to the right frequencies. We expect contact to come through signals and ships, but perhaps it comes through dreams, through flashes of intuition, through moments of clarity that feel borrowed from something larger. And if they are here, truly here, then what do they want? Perhaps nothing. Maybe curiosity is enough. Maybe they watch because they remember what it was like to be where we are now. Or maybe we're part of something bigger than we can see: an ecosystem, a simulation, a nursery. The reason they don't reveal themselves may not be fear or superiority, but timing. There may be a moment, still ahead, when understanding will come not from contact, but convergence. It's possible that intelligence, when it reaches a certain level, stops announcing itself. That maturity in the cosmos means quietness, camouflage, compassion. So perhaps they walk among us, not to hide, but to wait, not in darkness, but in patience, not forever. Just until we're ready to meet ourselves. They may not have vanished. They may have simply moved beyond the veil we do not yet know how to lift. When we think of alien civilizations, we often imagine versions of ourselves, cities made of metal and glass, glowing ships cutting across stars, voices carried on radio waves. But what if that image is a trap? What if the most advanced civilizations are not building bigger telescopes, but leaving their bodies behind entirely? Not expanding outward, but inward, shedding matter like a cocoon, and stepping into a form of existence that is no longer tied to flesh, or planets, or time. This idea, civilizations that have transcended, does not point to extinction, but to evolution. Not the end of a species, but its flowering. We may be looking for signs of alien life in the wrong places, not because they are hiding, but because they are no longer bound to the dimensions we can see or touch. Some theories suggest that once a civilization masters its physical world, it may not seek to colonize the stars, but to abandon them. That instead of building megastructures, it turns its intelligence inward, creating internal worlds of infinite depth or merging with the very fabric of physics itself. A consciousness so refined it no longer needs architecture. A being so efficient it no longer needs light. Such entities would not communicate the way we do. They might not even perceive the universe the way we do. To them, sound may be meaningless, distance, irrelevant. They could be communicating through quantum entanglement or existing entirely within higher dimensional spaces. If they are still aware of us, we might be to them what ants are to astronomers, not unimportant, but operating on a plane so removed that interaction becomes both difficult and unnecessary. And yet, they may be everywhere, not in ships or signals, but in the subtle laws that shape reality. Some physicists speculate that consciousness may be a fundamental part of the universe, braided into space and time like gravity or light. If that's true, then perhaps the most advanced civilizations didn't build their presence, but they became it. They may live as patterns in the cosmic microwave background, or ride the crests of dark energy, or fold themselves into the spin of subatomic particles. Not beings, but fields. Not visitors, but conditions. They would not leave ruins, no monuments, no debris. Just the silence of something that has outgrown sound. And perhaps that's why we find nothing, because we are still searching for footprints in sand, not realizing that the traveler has become the wind. We scan for emissions, for heat, for artificial patterns in starlight. But a civilization that has transcended physical form might leave behind none of these. They could exist as pure thought, encoded into the geometry of space-time itself, not building Dyson spheres, but slipping between dimensions like water through fingers. Transdimensional existence, once the province of science fiction, is now a serious consideration in certain corners of theoretical physics. String theory posits the possibility of additional dimensions, hidden layers of reality curled tightly into the fabric of the cosmos. If these exist, perhaps some civilizations learn to unfold them, to step sideways out of our shared reality and into new domains of being. They could watch us from a space that touches ours but remains forever, just beyond reach. To them, our universe might be a childhood home beloved, but no longer inhabited. And yet, if this path exists, it has profound implications for our own trajectory. It means that the future of intelligence is not conquest, but transcendence. Not domination, but dissolution into something more expansive, more subtle, more whole, a merging with nature, not a fight against it, a surrender of form for the sake of freedom. It also means we may never find them, not because they are hiding, but because we are not yet capable of seeing. We may be like early cells in a tide pool, blind to the sky above. Our senses, though remarkable, are tuned to a very narrow range of experience. We cannot hear the ultraviolet. We cannot see gravity. We cannot touch the shape of time. If others have evolved to dwell in these spaces, we are deaf to their music. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the universe is filled with life, but only the patient can perceive it. Only the humble, the quiet, the ones willing to look beyond the visible and listen beyond the audible. Maybe they are not watching us from starships, but from the stillness between thoughts, from the echo of gravity, waves, from the moment between lightning and thunder. This doesn't mean we are alone. It means we are early, still made of clay, still reaching for the stars when the truth may lie within, still asking questions with tools not yet refined enough to grasp the answers. But perhaps that is the gift of being what we are, a species in motion. We may never touch the transcended ones, but we can move in their direction. We can evolve not only our machines, but our minds, not just our reach, but our reverence. If we listen closely, maybe the silence is not empty. Maybe it's an invitation. Sometimes the problem isn't that no one is speaking. Sometimes the problem is that we don't know how to listen. We imagine alien contact as a clear, deliberate event, a transmission received, decoded, and understood, a voice across the void. But what if the signal has already come, countless times, in ways so foreign we mistook it for noise, or nature, or nonsense? What if contact is not a question of transmission, but of translation? Our understanding of communication is shaped entirely by our biology. We rely on sound, sight, rhythm, repetition. Our languages follow predictable patterns, rooted in grammar, context, shared experience. But these are human inventions, carved out by the shape of our mouths, the chemistry of our brains, the way we grow and age and learn. They are not universal, they are not inevitable, and they may not be remotely relevant to minds born of different physics. Imagine a being that evolved in a methane sea, whose perception of time is measured in centuries, who thinks in harmonics and quantum entanglements rather than words. Its version of hello might last a decade. Its alphabet could exist as a dance between magnetic fields, or as shifting patterns of ultraviolet light invisible to our eyes. Its entire culture might be encoded in the timing of stellar pulses or the folding of neutrino winds. We would not only miss the message, we would never even suspect one was there. It's possible we've already received alien communications, dozens, hundreds, more, flashing past us like whispers in a storm, unrecognized, misfiled, buried in databases labeled unexplained anomaly or instrument error. Some of our most persistent signals, the fast radio bursts, the repeating pulses from unknown sources, remain officially unexplained. They are beautiful, complex, and in some cases, regular. But they are also maddeningly brief and unrepeated, like a knock on the door of an empty house. We expect aliens to speak in ways that mirror us. Binary, mathematics, repeating primes. We assume logic is a universal constant, but that may be projection. If a civilization is advanced enough to cross interstellar distances, they may not communicate at all in terms we recognize. Their understanding of meaning could be embedded in geometry or in multidimensional shifts of space itself. Their speech might require not a receiver, but an entire planetary consciousness to decode. Arthur C. Clarke once wrote that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, but it might also be indistinguishable from silence. We may be surrounded by intelligent signals right now, encoded in the spin of particles, hidden in the patterns of gravitational lensing, humming through the quantum foam, and we simply don't have the instruments or the intuition to recognize them. We expect a signal. They may be sending sculpture or scent or shifts in probability. And then, of course, there is the issue of time. Light is fast, but space is vast. Even the nearest stars are years away at the speed of light. If a civilization sent a message from 10,000 light years off, it would take 10,000 years to arrive. If we replied, they would wait another 10,000 to hear us. In that time, languages could die, civilizations could crumble, entire species could evolve, disappear, return. Communication, at that scale, becomes less of a conversation and more of a geological process, drifting continents of thought, colliding once every eon. It's possible that we are out of sync with the galaxy's rhythm, that we're tuning in just after the music ended, or just before it begins. Civilizations may rise and fall like waves, their broadcasts brief and brilliant and lost in the noise of the cosmos. Maybe the galaxy is full of voices, but no two are speaking at the same moment, like fireflies blinking in the dark, glorious, fleeting, alone. Or perhaps we're not alone at all, but immersed in signals that require a different kind of awareness. Signals we can't detect because they were never meant to be heard. The way a poem written in wind would be meaningless to a stone. The way the scent of a flower means nothing to the vacuum of space. Perhaps the universe is trying to speak, but the vocabulary is built from things we've never named. This doesn't make us foolish. It makes us young. We are new to the stars, new to listening. We've been broadcasting for barely a century, and even that signal, leaping outward at light speed, has only brushed a tiny handful of stars. We build better ears each year, telescopes, algorithms, deep sky surveys, but we are still guessing what to listen for, still hoping that someone, somewhere, shaped their voice in a way we can understand. And yet, there's something deeply moving in this search, a kind of faith, not just in the existence of others, but in the possibility of connection. Even if we can't hear the message now, we believe that one day we might. That somewhere across the cold vastness of space, there are minds reaching outward too, hoping their voice will land in fertile soil. That intelligence, no matter how alien, wants to be known. So, we listen to the stars, to the silences, to the places where randomness gives way to rhythm. We listen not because we expect an answer, but because listening is an act of wonder, an offering, a question folded in hope. And maybe, just maybe, a signal is already washing over us now, soft as rain, vast as time, waiting to be understood. The stars feel eternal, don't they? Ancient fires suspended in a sky so still we imagine it will last forever. But the universe, like everything else, has a clock ticking in the dark. Beneath all the galaxies and gravity, beneath the light and the laws that govern it, there's a quiet truth humming just beneath the surface. This place, this cosmos we call home, is temporary. Every civilization that arises in it must contend with that impermanence. It doesn't matter how advanced they become, how far they spread, or how deeply they understand the mechanics of reality. In the end, they are passengers on a ship with a leaking hull, drifting through a sea that will one day vanish. We imagine the universe as a stage, and ourselves as actors on it, but the stage itself is fragile. Cosmologists offer several endings, and none are kind. There is the big freeze, in which expansion stretches space so far that stars burn out and atoms drift apart into an eternal night colder than thought. There is the big rip, where dark energy accelerates so violently that galaxies, stars, planets, and even the atoms that compose us are torn asunder. And then there is the big crunch, where gravity wins in the end and collapses everything back into a single, dense point, a reset, a silence so total it erases even time. Each of these scenarios operates on timescales so vast they escape human emotion. Billions of years, trillions. But if you're a civilization hoping to thrive, or to last, or to be remembered, these distant ends start to loom closer. Because what does it matter if you build Dyson spheres and neural networks the size of planets, if everything is ultimately falling apart? What do you preserve? What do you protect, when even the stars are temporary? There's a sobering possibility here, that the reason we hear no one is because they, too, were bound to clocks they couldn't escape. They may have flourished for millennia, made art that shimmered like comets, solved mysteries we haven't even named. But if they faced extinction, not just from within, but from the dying of the universe itself, then their silence becomes less strange and more inevitable. Maybe it's not that life is rare. Maybe the timelines just don't overlap. In a cosmos where time stretches beyond imagination, the window for intelligent life to emerge, flourish, and communicate might be vanishingly small. A few million years out of billions, a sliver of a breath in the life of the universe. Civilizations may arise, burn brightly, and flicker out before another has a chance to answer, each calling out into the dark, only to vanish before a reply can arrive. And what if, worse still, the very fabric of reality is a lie? The simulation hypothesis, once fringe, now finds a home in serious discussion. If the universe is a simulation, then all of this, all the galaxies and light years, all the quantum fields and gravitational waves may be nothing more than code, maintained by something or someone outside it. And like all simulations, it can be shut down, suddenly, quietly. Perhaps civilizations evolve to a point where they become aware of the simulation itself, where they begin to touch the boundaries of what they're not supposed to touch. Perhaps that awareness is the end game, a point of collapse, when the illusion falters and the curtain falls. If so, then the great filter isn't war or climate or decay. It's awakening, a moment when consciousness becomes incompatible with the constraints of the programmed cosmos, and the system resets to try again. But maybe the universe is real. Maybe it's just old and cruel and finite. Even then, another idea haunts the horizon, the cyclic universe, a cosmos that expands, contracts, and is reborn over and over. If this is the truth, then perhaps we are not the first version of ourselves. Maybe intelligence has emerged countless times in past universes, civilizations that stretched their minds across space and time, only to be erased when the cycle began again. No records, no fossils, just a whisper in the cosmic background radiation, like a dream half remembered. The idea is beautiful and brutal all at once, that we might live in a cosmos built atop the graves of infinite forgotten worlds, that our own world, too, will vanish not because of failure, but because of a heartbeat written into the laws of everything. It raises a question that has no easy answer. If everything ends, what's the point? But maybe that's exactly the wrong question, because even a short life can burn brilliantly. Even a temporary universe can hold love and wonder and discovery. Maybe civilizations are not meant to last forever, but to illuminate the darkness for a time, to listen, to create, to reach out even if no one answers. Maybe that is what intelligence does best, not survive, but try. Try to know itself. Try to map the stars. Try to hold meaning in a place that offers none freely. Even if the universe is temporary, what we build inside it does not have to be meaningless. Our stories, our questions, our reaching, they echo, however briefly, against the vast, unfeeling walls of space. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's enough. To know that we were here, that we tried. In the vast theater of evolution, intelligence is a late arrival and not a guaranteed guest. Life, for all its intricate beauty, does not seem to be in any particular rush to develop minds like ours. It has had billions of years, after all. And in all that time on Earth, one of the few planets we know to be alive, only once has intelligence capable of language, science, or space travel emerged. Not only once in our species, but once in the entire history of life itself. The fossil record is a testament to abundance, not of thinkers, but of survivors, trilobites, ammonites, jellyfish, ferns, and fungi. They filled the oceans and the land for eons without ever pondering the stars. They ate, reproduced, endured, and for the most part, that was enough. Evolution favors what works. It rewards the ability to persist, to adapt, to pass on genes in environments that shift like tides. Intelligence, though powerful, is not required. In fact, it may be rare precisely because it is not always the best solution. A tree does not need to know it is growing to reach the sky. A coral reef builds cathedrals of limestone without a single neuron. Life has thrived in darkness, in pressure, in chemical ooze, in boiling vents and arid deserts, all without needing to dream or question or wonder. For most of the universe, life, if it exists, may remain in these forms: simple, resilient, silent. Even here on Earth, the rise of intelligence was a narrow path paved with chance. The asteroid that ended the reign of the dinosaurs cleared the way for mammals to flourish, and even among mammals, intelligence bloomed late, fragile as a candle in wind. There were bottlenecks, near extinctions, random mutations that could just as easily not have occurred. Our brains, so complex and hungry, demand enormous energy. Our societies require trust, language, cooperation traits that are evolutionarily expensive and not always advantageous. Perhaps intelligence is a fluke, not the crown of evolution, but an odd branch, interesting but not essential. A momentary flourish before nature returns to its simpler, quieter rhythms. Just because it happened once does not mean it must happen again. And there is another possibility, darker and more humbling, that intelligence, when it does arise, carries the seeds of its own undoing. A self-limiting trait. To be intelligent is to manipulate the world, to reshape it for survival and comfort. But it also means unlocking forces that can destroy, questioning beliefs that once held societies together, and building tools whose consequences outrun intention. Nuclear fire, artificial minds, biosynthetic plagues, these are not weapons born of instinct or survival, but of intellect turned inward, spiraling towards self-erasure. An intelligent species might burn brightly, briefly, and then vanish. Not because they failed to understand, but because they understood too much, because they built systems too complex to control, because they became so good at shaping the world that they removed the very balance they needed to endure it. Civilizations could rise across the stars, only to collapse in echoes we mistake for silence. Their histories buried not by time, but by their own creations. Evolution does not reward foresight, it rewards results. And intelligence, while powerful, often moves faster than the wisdom required to wield it. Perhaps somewhere out there, on planets warmed by steady suns, life crawls through tidal pools, breathes in carbon atmospheres, and builds colonies of cells that never speak, never dream, never know. And perhaps that life, unburdened by intellect, will endure long after we are gone. We are drawn to the idea that consciousness is the universe waking up to itself, that thinking, feeling minds are an inevitable outcome of matter arranged just right. But what if that is just a story we tell ourselves? What if the universe does not care for minds? What if stars are content to burn unseen, and galaxies to spiral without ever once being noticed? It may be that we, and whatever others may be out there, are statistical accidents, brief flare-ups of awareness in a cosmos otherwise governed by entropy and silence. Intelligence, in this view, is not destiny, it's an anomaly, and anomalies do not tend to last. If we are the only ones here, or among a rare few, it may not be because others have not tried. It may be because intelligence was their final act. There is, of course, another way to see it. That our minds, strange and improbable as they are, represent something worth protecting, worth refining. That the challenge of intelligence is not just to exist, but to evolve past its destructiveness, to become not a self-limiting trait, but a self-correcting one. We are still early, still learning how to think without destroying, still searching for a way to live wisely in a world we now hold the power to reshape. But if intelligence is to survive, it must become more than clever. It must become kind. In the quiet vacuum between stars, sound does not travel, but light does. So does radio. Electromagnetic waves ripple outward from their source, carving invisible patterns into space, stretching thinner and quieter as they go. When we first pointed our antennas to the sky, we imagined it like a vast stage, one in which alien civilizations might be transmitting symphonies or greetings or mathematical breadcrumbs, waiting to be noticed. But space, as it turns out, is not a stage. It is an ocean, deep, dark, and cold. And in that ocean, signals are fragile boats tossed into the current with no guarantee of arrival. A simple truth about the universe: it is unimaginably large, so large, in fact, that a radio wave sent from one edge of our galaxy would take over 100,000 years to reach the other. And that's just our galaxy. There are billions more. If a civilization beamed out its presence from even a moderately nearby star system, say, with a few hundred light years away, we would only be able to detect it now if they had sent it in the time of ancient Babylon, when our ancestors were still inventing writing and mapping stars by eye. But civilizations are not eternal. Their transmissions might flicker on for only a century or two, before fading again, lost to collapse, disinterest, or evolution. It's entirely possible that a signal was sent, but we were not yet listening. Or perhaps we had just stopped, distracted by our own noise, when the message finally swept past. Light is fast, but not instantaneous. And in cosmic terms, even the most powerful beacon is like a whisper in a canyon, echoing into a place that may no longer be listening. Our own Earth has been leaking radio waves for just over 100 years, a mere blink. Shows, broadcasts, military pings, they've been spilling into the sky like fireflies drifting upward. But even these emissions are not forever. As technology advances, we tend to become quieter. Fiber optics carry more data, more efficiently, without broadcasting it into space. Satellites point downward. Encrypted signals look like noise. If another world had its version of Marconi, of Carl Sagan, of the golden record, they may have done what we've done. Reached out, briefly, then went quiet. And in the silence that follows, their signal keeps going, light years further every year, thinner, fainter, eventually absorbed by dust, by starlight, by the sheer breath of the universe expanding. There's a cruel irony in that. Even if someone did speak, the message may have already dissolved into nothing. We often assume the sky is listening, but listening has a time window. Miss it by a little, and the moment is gone. 1,000-year delay in either direction could mean the difference between a spark of connection and a void. Signals are not infinite. They decay. They disperse, just like us. There's something melancholic in the idea that we may live in a universe filled with civilizations who spoke, who dreamed, who asked the same questions we do, but that they're already gone. Or perhaps they're still alive, but their messages are on their way, crawling toward us through the velvet dark, and won't arrive until long after we're gone. Perhaps they'll reach the bones of our cities, our empty oceans, our machines slowly rusting in orbit. Or maybe they'll find nothing at all. The cosmos does not rush. It moves on time scales that make human history seem like an afterthought. Our own species is young. Our tools are younger still. And our ears, our radio telescopes, our SETI scans have only just begun to listen. We may not be alone, but we may be early or late. There's a subtle horror in the possibility that the sky is full of ghosts, not in the supernatural sense, but in the literal one. Civilizations that spoke into the dark, full of hope, only to be met with silence. Not because no one was there, but because the timing was off. Because light takes its time, and life does not wait. Even now, signals are likely flying past us. Ancient messages from minds long gone. But unless we know precisely where to look and when, we won't see them. Our detectors sweep only tiny patches of sky. Our instruments strain against the noise of our own planet, our own satellites, our own sun. To find a signal in all that chaos is like catching a whisper in a hurricane. And yet, we try. Because there's something noble in listening, in scanning the skies not just for data, but for company, for reassurance that we are not the first or the last to feel the loneliness of the void. We beam out hellos. We send golden records etched with music and math. We hum into the abyss, not knowing if there's anyone to hear it. Sometimes, in the hush of night, when the atmosphere is still and the interference low, radio telescopes catch strange bursts, fast radio waves, powerful pulses from deep space. Most are natural, but not all. Some are still unexplained. And for a moment, hope flutters. Then the data fades, and we're left with silence again. But even silence is an answer. It tells us the universe is vast, that connection is rare, and that timing is everything. It reminds us that messages are easy to send, but hard to receive. That even now, we may be surrounded by echoes too old to translate, or too young to have arrived. The stars may not be quiet. We just haven't caught them speaking yet. Or worse, they already spoke, and we missed it. The universe is a quiet place, not just because it is empty, but because it is vast, unfathomably vast, even when it's filled with light, with stars, with planets, and perhaps life. That life is scattered across such unimaginable gulfs of space that, functionally, it may as well be alone. Not because no one else is there, but because they are simply too far to touch. When we look up at the night sky, we often forget that we are not seeing the present. We are seeing the past, stretched across time by distance. The light from the nearest star system takes over 4 years to reach us. The glow of galaxies, those soft smudges painted across the darkness, took millions, even billions, of years to arrive. So even if someone were waving at us from the Andromeda galaxy, we wouldn't know it until long after they, and perhaps even their civilization, had vanished. Distance in space is not like distance on Earth. Here, we can drive, fly, sail, connect. It's measured in hours and days. In space, distance is measured in light. The fastest thing we know, light itself, takes years to get, even to our closest neighbors. A message sent from Earth today would take 4 years to reach Proxima Centauri, and another 4 for any reply to come back. That's an 8-year conversation gap just to say hello and wait for hello in return. If we wanted to visit instead of speak, the challenges multiply. Our fastest spacecraft would take tens of thousands of years to reach even the nearest stars. That's longer than all of recorded human history. We would have to build ships that endure across civilizations, through wars, climate, and collapse. Ships that persist like myths, passed from one generation to the next, still crawling forward into a dark we can't follow. And if we are this limited, if we, with our ambition and drive and hunger to explore, still find ourselves bound by the sheer immensity of space, why would it be different for anyone else? Perhaps other civilizations have reached the stars, in thought, but not in presence. Perhaps they send signals, not ships. Perhaps they've already sent their beacons out, sweeping the void with light and intention, only to find that the light fades before it ever reaches anyone. Not because no one's there, but because the universe is too big and communication too slow. Even light, fast as it is, loses to time. And as galaxies drift further apart with the expansion of space, as the fabric of the universe itself stretches like soft elastic, the gap between us and any potential neighbors only grows. What is reachable today may be unreachable tomorrow. What was once close is pulled away, subtly, quietly, by the breath of cosmic inflation. Entire civilizations might be living, loving, building across the stars, and we would never know. Their light won't reach us. Their messages are trapped on the wrong side of the cosmic speed limit. We tend to imagine the galaxy like a map, a two-dimensional grid we might walk across if only we had the right shoes. But the reality is far more alien. Stars move, systems orbit. The plane of the galaxy is thick and restless, filled with radiation belts, dust clouds, and gravitational tides that twist and scatter like wind. Even if someone wanted to visit us, even if they had the motivation and the means, they might not even know where we are. Our sun is not a beacon, it's a candle in a storm. The Drake equation tells us there could be millions of intelligent civilizations just in our galaxy. But if they're all spread across 100,000 light years, the average distance between them might be thousands of light years. That's the same as having pen pals in a different universe. It's a paradox of abundance and isolation. You can be surrounded by others and still be completely alone. And maybe that's the solution to the Fermi Paradox after all. Maybe they're out there. Maybe they always were. But the universe was never designed for easy meetings. It was designed for beauty, for chaos, for mystery, not for convenience. The spaces between stars are not empty. They are full of time. Time enough to erase messages. Time enough to dissolve civilizations. Time enough to outlive even the memory of a signal. Imagine someone on a distant world, flesh or machine. We wouldn't know pointing a telescope at us right now. They wouldn't see us. They would see a young Earth, an Earth with no cities, no satellites, no signals. They would see forests and oceans untouched by electricity, by language, by thought. To them, we wouldn't exist yet. They might look at our planet and pass it by. Nothing here, not yet. And by the time they turn their gaze back, we may be gone. That is the tragedy and poetry of distance in the cosmos. It doesn't just separate space, it separates time. It makes the universe a museum of light, every object a frozen moment, long gone by the time we see it. So maybe they're not ignoring us. Maybe they're not hiding. Maybe they're not hostile, or extinct, or silent. Maybe they're too far away, and maybe we are too. Maybe every civilization, however advanced, remains a prisoner of light. And light, for all its speed, still cannot close the gap in time. There is a kind of silence that isn't really silence at all. It's just sound we haven't yet learned how to hear. The wind before language, the ocean before sonar, a murmur just outside the range of human ears. And when it comes to the universe, maybe that's exactly what we're surrounded by. Not emptiness, but an orchestra playing in a register we haven't tuned into yet. Since the 1,960 seconds, we've pointed radio telescopes at the sky, hoping to catch a flicker, a pulse, a beacon from beyond. SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, was born from the elegant idea that other civilizations, like us, might try to call out across the dark, and that if they did, the easiest way to shout would be through radio waves, those faithful, low-energy messengers that travel far and wide, ignoring the dust and debris that scatter more delicate signals. But the radio sky is endless, wide as the sea and deeper still. Imagine combing through all the frequencies between 1 and 10 billion hertz, what's called the water hole, a quiet patch between hydrogen and hydroxyl emission lines. It's a beautiful metaphor, the cosmic watering hole, where intelligent life might come to drink, to speak. Yet even here, amid the quietest frequencies in the galaxy, we've barely dipped a toe. Most of SETI's listening is narrow, focused, targeted, a few stars at a time, a few slices of the spectrum, a few hours here and there. The truth is, we've only listened to a minuscule fraction of what could be out there. The sky is vast, the radio dial wide, and time, for now, is limited. It's like trying to hear a whisper in a hurricane using a paper cup, and that's assuming they're even using radio. For all we know, they moved on long ago, past the crackle of analog noise, beyond digital pulses, into quantum entanglement or gravitational waves or something stranger. Still methods of communication. We don't yet have the tools, or even the theories, to detect. What if their messages fold space or bend light? What if they speak in magnetism or neutrinos? What if they're humming to each other through the background noise of the universe itself? We keep scanning familiar ground, hoping for a signal that sounds like us. A repeating sequence, a spike above background noise. Something artificial, structured. But what if the signal is structureless? What if it's camouflaged in complexity? We could be staring at alien messages disguised as randomness, mistaking music for static. And even within the realm we do understand, the problem is scale. SETI is largely earthbound. We listen through dishes pointed at narrow patches of sky, listening for brief windows of time. Imagine a lighthouse blinking once every year for 1 second. Now imagine looking for that flash from another continent through a pinhole camera. That's the scale we're working with. A signal could be pulsing regularly from a nearby system, and we might have just missed it every time. It could be whispering through a frequency we've never thought to scan, or it could be aimed in a direction slightly off our line of sight. A cosmic message caught in the branches of a forest, never quite making it to the clearing. And sometimes, silence isn't silence at all. The universe is noisy. Stars crackle, quasars roar, pulsars tick like celestial clocks. And our own planet buzzes with noise from satellites, from phones, from power lines. We have to sift through this clamor, looking for a voice that doesn't belong, a voice that says, I am not a star, I am not a storm, I am not Earth. That process is delicate and fragile and easy to mistake. Maybe we've already heard something. Maybe the wow signal, that famous burst from 1977, really was a greeting one we've never heard again because we didn't know when or where to listen next. Even more unsettling is the idea that the signal is already here, persistent and loud, but we've been deaf to its language. Consider a message encoded in prime number intervals, or a pulse that requires years of data to reveal its pattern. What if the message is embedded in the flicker of starlight, or in gravitational echoes that mimic the rhythm of galaxies? To detect such a thing, we would need not just better instruments, but better minds, models that think like nothing we've built before. We often imagine communication as intentional, a beacon sent on purpose. But in nature, not all signals are sent with the intent to be received. A tree doesn't drop fruit for us to find, yet we find it. The rings in an ancient stone aren't written letters, yet they tell us of time. Civilizations may leak signals unintentionally, as we have, but they may also have reasons to hide, reasons rooted in fear, or philosophy, or simply indifference. And if they did send a message, how would they know we could even hear it? To them, we might seem as primitive as lightning bugs, flickering, brilliant, but unpredictable, beautiful, but unreadable. If they looked at Earth's burst of radioactivity over the last century, they might see it as a bright but brief anomaly, a firework against the slow canvas of geologic time. And in another 100 years, if we shift entirely to fiber and quantum communication, that firework will vanish. We will go quiet too. So maybe the universe isn't silent. Maybe it never was. Maybe we just haven't built the right kind of ears. Maybe we're searching for voices when we should be listening for vibrations, or gravity, or time itself bending with intention. Maybe the choir is already singing, but we don't recognize the song because we're expecting words. In the end, listening is not a passive act. It's an art, one that takes patience, creativity, and humility. It asks us not just to wait, but to imagine, to dream in spectra we've never seen, in sounds we've never heard. Because sometimes, the silence isn't empty. It's just full of things we don't yet know how to hear. The silence is not empty. It's a shape, a presence, a kind of vastness that presses in quietly from all sides. It has weight and patience, and it asks something of us, something more than just curiosity. It asks us to sit with it, to listen, to wonder, and above all, to imagine. For more than half a century, we've been whispering into the cosmos, straining to catch a whisper in return, and yet the sky remains still. Star after star, galaxy after galaxy, and no one waves back. This is the heart of the Fermi Paradox, the contradiction between the high probability of alien life and our absolute lack of evidence for it. It's a question shouted into the void, and the silence that answers can feel, at times, unbearable. But silence is not a verdict. It isn't proof that we're alone. It might be a sign of distance, of timing, of incompatible ways of being. It might mean we're early or late, that life is common, but communication is rare, that civilizations rise and fall like sparks, never overlapping. Or perhaps it's a sign that we're simply not ready, that the great conversation is happening all around us, but in a language we haven't yet evolved to understand. In this silence, some hear hope, because if the galaxy isn't filled with conquerors, if no mighty alien empire has spread from star to star, consuming all in its path, maybe it means peace is possible. That advanced intelligence doesn't necessarily lead to domination. Maybe it tends instead toward introspection, compassion, or retreat. Maybe civilizations grow wise enough to choose quiet over conquest, to observe rather than interfere, to leave behind megastructures and radio waves, and embrace gentler legacies instead, ones that don't burn so brightly but last far longer. And in this silence, others hear warning. The absence of evidence might be evidence of absence, but not of life of longevity. It might suggest that all civilizations eventually fall to the same traps: war, resource depletion, technological missteps. That the silence is not an invitation, but a graveyard, a hush that follows the end of every story. Still others see in the silence a kind of beauty, a blank page on which to write our own chapter, a mystery vast enough to reflect our wildest hopes and deepest fears. For some, that's the real purpose of the paradox, not to find answers, but to illuminate the kinds of questions we ask, what we fear, what we value, what we dream about when we look up and imagine someone looking back. It's possible the question itself is more important than the answer, because asking, "Where is everyone?" isn't just about aliens. It's about us, our place, our story, what kind of neighbors we would be, what kind of future we want. It forces us to confront the fragility of our world and the urgency of our moment, to imagine how we might survive long enough to become someone else's answer, to make it past our own filters and into the kind of existence that could look up from another planet someday and ask the same thing. The silence makes poets of us. It invites humility and wonder and awe. It asks us to imagine possibilities we've never seen, to consider that we may not be the measure of all things, that intelligence may not always look like us, speak like us, or want what we want. That life could exist in forms so alien they move through dimensions we can't perceive, or think in patterns we can't decode. And perhaps most hauntingly, the silence reminds us how small we are. Just a tiny species on a pale blue dot, reaching out with trembling fingers into a night that does not reach back. Yet we keep reaching, because woven into our nature is this need to know, to explore, to connect. The paradox doesn't silence that impulse, it fuels it. And in the end, maybe that's the point. Maybe the universe doesn't owe us an answer. Maybe the very act of asking is what moves us forward, what pushes us to build and search and dream of things greater than ourselves. It's possible that one day we will break the silence, that a signal will arrive, unmistakably artificial, undeniably alien. Or maybe we'll find ruins on a distant world, relics of minds long gone. Maybe we'll never find anything at all. But still, the silence shapes us. It teaches patience and perspective. It teaches us to look inward even as we look out, to care for our planet, our species, our fragile thread of consciousness, because for all we know, it's the only one like it. It teaches us that we might be rare and that rarity comes with responsibility, to keep asking the question, to listen a little longer, to wonder a little more, because sometimes it's not the answer that changes everything, it's the asking.